Hey there. So today I want to continue our talks about Doctor Who. This time I want to talk about Doctor Who Resolution, the 2019 New Year's special, and the discrepancies between critical and audience scoring. Now, when you look at this as well, I want to make something perfectly clear here. If you like a show, you like a show. This is not meant to insult you there at all. There are always people that internalize this. If you don't like something, they like it a lot. Well, then they internalize it and feel like they're under attack. This isn't there to attack you. This is me talking about what I feel about this. Also, I'm rather intrigued by the idea of how this show was marketed when it started out. You know, that onset marketing by the BBC, and how as audience scores come in lower and lower, how these things are explained away. I mean, I would encourage you to go out and to look at a few articles that have come up recently. See some statements by Jodie Whittaker saying, yeah, I understand because, and see what kind of finger is pointed out there, because that kind of stuff, it kills audience interest. And I have to say, you know, being accused of being an ist and on, that doesn't really say why I don't like a show. You know, I don't like a show probably when people are accusing me of something. It probably impacts my view of it because I don't separate them, but it doesn't explain why I don't like something and why most people don't like something as well. Now, when you're looking at these scoring differences, 94%, you finally had a rotten come in. That after, I think, 5 days of having it set at 100%. So you had, initially, you had 17 fresh out of 17. Your average rating was almost 8.4. And today you had another one come in that dropped the average rating to 8.14 out of 10, with the season ratings, of course, 18 people. So the audience rating, it is maintained around 15%. You can see that average rating maintaining at about 1.5 out of 5, with users rating over 1,200. So you have 1,200 reviews here. And if you wanted to compare the average rating to this average rating, you know, just double that, because that would make it a 3 versus an 8.14. I mean, man, that is a big difference here. Now, if you go and you look up why exactly critics rate things the way that they do, you know, some would say things like from Nerdist here, what we got was a story that felt like the familiar Who again. Here's another one here. With that action-packed, emotionally driven finale, Resolution successfully kicks off the new year while leaving us wanting more of this Doctor Who. Confident, fun, and finally on solid footing after a shaky 11th season. Finally on solid footing. I swear, if you go in and you look at the reviews out there of the season, if you think that even one show, if you thought that was good, leaving you on solid footing, yeah, I wouldn't consider that at all, even if I would have liked this episode. Doctor Who can tell so many kinds of stories, from the straight-up monster-laden action to the heady tales of morality, but it is arguably at its best, as it was here, when it naturally manages to mix the both of them. So you can see these scores that continue this, even, you know, your 3.5s here. Oh, I so desperately wanted Doctor Who Season 11, Episode 11 to wow us with something super flashy and potentially ridiculous. So you can see a score that, even though it's kind of low, that's still, oh, well, that's going to be fresh here, and so on. You finally get a negative one for a 6 out of 10. Resolution suffers from the same problems as showrunners' other recent episodes. There's the structure of a good story, but many niggling problems mean it could be much better. Yeah, the show has issues. I think that is something a lot of audience say. And, you know, there have been some positive reviews that have come in from audiences too. You have things like this. This episode was a more classic Who feel and ends up making the Daleks dangerous again. Unfortunately, while this season has had ups and downs, a lot of people who want it to fail are flooding bad reviews. So here's somebody saying, this is campaign reviewing, this is probably the second best episode this season and the first time since the Daleks. So you can say basically, you know, Daleks are dangerous and on. That's basically what they're going with. And people People are trying to destroy scoring here. Here's another positive as well from audiences. Really not that bad, with the story being interesting, with a new take on the Dalek controlling a person. The scene where Dalek destroys a group from the army was pretty cool and reinforces the power of the Dalek. Unfortunately, the ending seemed a bit rushed and unrealistic. I think they should have materialized the TARDIS around the Dalek and take it from behind. Hopefully that makes sense. Also, how did a 9th century army kill a Dalek and tear it apart? So they gave it a 4 out of 5. I mean, still a good score there. Here, is some negatives there. I was looking at this one, it's very negative. Written by a chimpanzee with a head injury. Please stop breaking action with 10-minute dialogue about a dysfunctional father-son relationship. Here's another one here. This is at a star instead of half star. I was almost hopeful for this episode, as while I knew it would be bad, even bad Dalek stories in the past have had a certain watchability for me because of the Daleks themselves. However, I found this just as bad as anything in season 11, if not worse, because it got the Daleks so wrong. The plot was nonsensical, full of plot holes and questionable continuity. The Dalek itself was so bland and felt more like a bad Venom ripoff while in mutant form, and like a parody while in its casing. Jodie Whittaker's portrayal of the Doctor was, of course, as unlikable and over the top as ever, too. And you can see all of again, I'm skipping these scores that don't say anything. And the reason that I skip those is because, again, if you're talking about campaign downvoting, let's actually see what people are saying and really see if you agree with this or not, because you don't have to agree with anything out there. So here's another half star. Dumping on single parents, defeating the Dalek with a microwave oven. This episode was just awful. The whole series overall is just SJW rubbish. Another half star here. I'd hoped this was going to be a step up from season 11. There were small patches where the show was passable. On the whole, though, a disappointment. It appears that this was written and filmed with the rest of season 11 and not as a response to feedback. So here's someone saying, hey, why don't you respond to our feedback? But again, if you hear that, really, again, go and look at articles that are a response to feedback and look at what people like Jodie Whittaker or your showrunners say. And then you can see why this show will not improve with that feedback. It won't improve unless someone forces it to improve. And well, the BBC, I don't kind of get the point that they'll do that. But continuing on, here's another half star. Fell asleep watching this, a poor finale to a poor season. The emotional garbage between Ryan and his dad was irrelevant and labored. Here's another half star. I had to sign up to Rotten Tomatoes to voice my feeling about this episode. It was hilariously bad. The joke about the Wi-Fi turning off and families forced to have a conversation was so cringy. I think the only reason I watched it was because it had become so bad it was a good type of show. So they're saying it's so bad it's good. I do watch movies that way too. I really like cringy movies. I actually like some low quality movies. So they're saying, hey, I liked it because of that. But continuing on, it is a very different type of show when it was first rebooted. I wonder if the show will course correct or continue its meteoric descent into oblivion. I feel like that will continue on. You just have some basics, dreadful rubbish here. So here's a 2 out, and it's talking about scoring. Someone should look at the huge disparity between the professional critic score of 100%, that's what we're talking about until today, and the audience score of 15%, and ask themselves which of the two is more authentic representation of how the series has been received. As a longtime Whovian, I try to enjoy and appreciate the change of style for season 11, and occasionally I've seen flashes of something better. My problem is not the silly plot lines. We've always had those. I think it's down to the scripts and perhaps down to the overall acting. It's also hard to tell if JW is not being used correctly or whether she simply lacks the charisma for the role. I feel like she lacks the charisma. Instead of giving her watered down Tennant or Smith, she might still have worked in her role as a darker Doctor. I think that might have worked out. Let's skip a few lines here. I wouldn't necessarily agree that Doctor Who has never sunk this low before. The current series actually reminds me quite a lot of the Davidson era. I slightly blame bland but nicey nice doctor with a trio of not always interesting companions. The Davison era attempted to sanitize some of the darker elements from the show. I can also see the showrunner had an admirable agenda, but his way of saturating every episode with worthy PC elements was both tiresome and quite condescending in all bad judgment. I have a feeling JW will do one more series and be gone, and as for series 11 and 12, I think they will eventually be viewed as an interesting but ultimately unsuccessful experiment in the franchise. Whatever showrunner at all was trying to do in series 11, and they had some admirable aims, they just forgot some of the basics. Well writing, choosing convincing actors, which have made the modern Doctor Who what it is. It's sad when you forget to actually do, well writing, as they said, to write a good script. It's also really bad when you don't hire the right actors. It pretty much says that maybe, you focused again on what they were talking about, agenda, putting certain things in storylines over how exactly that would be produced. Now, I'm going to end here. I thought that one was a good comment to end on. You can see other ones as well that talk about this being socialist propaganda. I mean, you have positives within this too, but, by and large, when you look at what people are saying, they're overall disappointed in the season. I'm wondering exactly what you thought about this 2019 special. We're talking about the New Year's special. How did that come across? Did you enjoy it? I mean, were you one of the people that said, hey, Dalek, that's great stuff? Or did you feel like that was too much downplay? Did the season itself, or the series itself, I should say, how did that impact your overall view of this? Did you come in with kind of a negative connotation with that and have that possibly impact it? I'm curious, because I may have had that as well. It's hard to shake off the whole season and say, well, this episode, at least it was better, because you see all of the problems that have been made manifest through the show, and they seem to continue here. But like I say, tell me what you think on that. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe, please like, hit that bell for notifications. I talk about a lot of stuff. Basically, I like to talk about entertainment and culturally where things are these days. It's interesting to look at movies, shows, and how they're advertised, not necessarily the end product. So that's kind of what I want to go with here. If you want to support beyond that, there are links within the description. I would appreciate that as well. But make sure you pop up every day for new content, and like I say, if you don't find something you like that day, then find something, the next day and on. But leave comments. I try to go through them all, even if I don't respond to them. And, it better informs me of where people are. And as always, thank you for tuning in.